China, EVs, and more, where my co-host Lei Sheng and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners, welcome back. We ask that you help us please get the word out about this podcast to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Lee. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, a patient Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. Good morning. This is Lei Sheng, your co-host, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number 176. 3 major milestones to mention at the top of the show. Polestar 3, job number 1 in the US. Envo L60, job number 1 in Hefei. And 10 years of XPeng. All happening in the last couple of days. So congrats to these brands. And we've been, fair to say, the 3 brands would probably mention them millions of times on our show.
Well, Envo
NIO, right?
Yeah, so an extension of NIO.
Yeah, so I think each of these milestones are pretty significant. I have to say Polestar 3 producing it in the US finally is.
Let me give my quick perspective on that. Everything else is just noise because they're building here. A lot of FUD, a lot of doubt and uncertainty. But at the end of the day, there's Americans building Polestars in South Carolina. So
yes, and it seemed, I think Polestar 3 was like unveiled, it was 2 years ago? Slightly less than 2 years ago, I believe. And there were some delays because of the software, LiDAR. I mean, it couldn't come at a better time because of the 100% tariffs, right? So, and then the Polestar 4 producing in South Korea next year is also a way to circumvent that, right? So,
well, what's important here is that unfortunately the lack of tariffs or the lack of significant tariffs didn't help the Polestar 2. So hopefully the 3 resonates more from a product standpoint and feature standpoint to Americans than the Polestar 2 did.
Yeah, because of the it's after all it's an SUV, so yeah, and
I went to a Polestar retail store near my house, and you couldn't take it for a ride. It was parked inside the retail store, and it was white. It would be great to see it in other colors. I like the clean lines of the white paint, but it also makes it a bit hospitalish. Like the entire retail experience is a little bit sterile because everything's white, everything's gray, everything's black. So I would normally lean into stuff like that, but this is almost too much.
Yeah, it's just totally different here with the kind of experience of trying to buy a car.
Let's reflect really quickly on the 10 years of XPeng. What's your first experience, and I'll tell you mine.
Well, the first experience, I don't have the photos, I think it was 2014 or 2015 when I went to Guangzhou and seeing one of the mule cars based on the Lexus. And now kind of thinking back to then, how far they've come and how difficult it still is for them to get on this momentum because of some of the failed models that they've launched in recent times. And we were on a show yesterday, right? We talked about this, maybe the last episode, about this NOA race, the smart driving. They were in the lead, but I don't think they are in the lead. They say they are in the lead. So these are some of the things that come up. But also of the experience, many of the experiences we've had, you and I, with the XPeng. So somehow it resonates more with us, maybe,
Yeah, I think it's important that we both visited. We've both spoken to Brian Gu. Have you spoken to He Xiaopeng?
Yes, this was 2019. I think in Guangzhou they had their 1024 event.
Right.
So yeah, I have.
And so I feel, Lei, that these NIOs, these Li Autos, and these XPengs, because you and I have tracked them literally since day one and seen them grow, seeing some of the challenges, talking to the people, being hopeful about them being able to jump or leap over some of these hurdles and challenges. And, it's just rooting for them because, people there personally and great people, good products. It's just a brutal market. My experience could have been 2016, 2017, and saw G3 and then got connected to a couple of higher ups there and spoke to them. I won't tell you who they are, but and then first time visiting was 2019, just before the pandemic, or end of 2019, early 2020, one of the two. And got to drive XPeng from XPeng. I'd driven XPengs from friends, and our good friend Elliot Richards from
Sure,
Fully
his
Charged,
owner, right?
he owned
Yeah.
a G3, and so again, they've evolved for sure. And we thought the P5 was going to be a decent hit for them. That failed, and so you almost want to be cautious when you say anything about a product being a clear-cut hit nowadays in China. I think the SU7 is a clear-cut hit, but that's looking backwards. And so
there's great expectations and there's great burden, and you only have to look at the upcoming Mona MO3 and the Envo L60. I mean, it would be hard to imagine if they don't do well. But what does do well mean?
So,
right?
So let me ask you, Lei, and we clarify. I think we clarified this a couple episodes. Envo is a separate brand.
Yes.
Mona is a trim package under the XPeng brand, correct?
Well, it's a new series. You can look at it as a new model, basically. But Envo is a separate brand, exactly.
Yes.
So it's a little bit different, but I mean, these are the volume getters, right? These are the drivers, and you would expect they're launching. So Mona launching end of this month, and then L60 launching
with a ceiling of $19,000.
L60 launching in about a month. So within that month, I'm sure Envo NIO is going to produce as many as they can because they want to deliver at the moment that the car is launched, right? That's what they want to do.
They have to. Any lead time between the launch and delivery, it gives the competitor a chance to incentivize the buyer to make a switch.
And that expectation is one example is the Stellato S9. The moment they announced that they got 2,500 units of order in 24 hours, the BAIC shares drops because of the expectations that they should have gotten more.
That's crazy, right?
I mean, for 500,000 RMB, actually 400,000 RMB, right? So,
for those that haven't seen the Stellato S9, it's a flagship that should be competing against the 7 Series, the S Class, and the 8.
And really, I think the one keyword that threw out what we talk about maybe today is that speed, right? The speed, it's the best of it, the worst of it. Speed kills, speed wins your market. And the latest example that one of the topics you put on was the fastest battery, but also the fastest iteration of a model changeover, and the culprit being Zeekr.
Can you go into more detail on that?
Well, I tweeted something else saying basically they have a 2023 year, 2024 year, and 2025 year model on sale all during the same year. Who does that? Only China EV Inc. Maybe only Zeekr.
I think Zeekr jumped the shark on that though,
Yeah.
because you're cannibalizing, and it's hard to. Could you imagine the amount of pressure that the suppliers are under now? Because their purchase orders are probably just 30 days out. So
Yeah, I mean, there's these protests. They went to the Zeekr building headquarters. I mean, there's these signs put up. So I don't know how this will play out and if it's a really dent into this Zeekr reputation. But I mean, that new gold battery, right? Think about it. Like 50, the existing, the old one with the Qilin or the Shenxing from 10% to 80%, 15 minutes, right? Under ideal conditions. I mean that is already lightning fast. And then when you bring it down to 10.5 minutes, it's that's part of the Juan, right? The rat race that's happening. And it's only a matter of time somebody else brings it down to the sub 10-minute.
and if you think about it, Lei, you go to Starbucks, unless you order online prior to picking it up, that's how long it takes to get a coffee. So it's almost the perfect timing,
Yeah.
8-10 minutes. And so the pressure to have a 400, 500-mile range battery decreases significantly. And if the battery pack is smaller, the car is lighter, and it's a positive reinforcing thing because the battery's smaller, the car is lighter. And so we're optimizing for a few different things. Whereas this Lucid Air, I think, is over 5,000 pounds. It's an amazing vehicle. The BMS needs to be really important. But if you could lop off a few hundred pounds because you have a smaller battery and you're not as worried about having that extra 75 miles of range, it creates a lot of flexibility now.
Yeah. And then also, going back to Envo, I think one of the metrics that they're trying to hit is that 12.1 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which in fact, this is something being available on the market soon. And Mercedes is with their next gen platform vehicle, that's the target they're trying to reach next year. And by the time it happens next year, somebody else is probably going to beat that number. It's continuing to.
But I think that's the key number now because of all the different chemistries and the one variable that people can't clearly understand, including me. So I'm not saying not me, is the battery management system. A lot of folks in the US, they're using other people's battery management system. I think the OEMs are trying to bring it in-house. But again, a great battery management system a la Tesla can probably eke out 10, 15% more efficiency from the same battery. And so those become a little less important. And I think this range per kilowatt hour is probably the moving forward going to be the most accurate measure of how efficient a pack is.
Yeah, and then the other part of the reason why Zeekr launched the 2025 model earlier was, I think in one of the interviews, executive interviews, it was shared actually that one of the pressure points, burdens in the competition in the market is indeed that leadership that XPeng supposedly has, the NOA game. I think Zeekr felt they were behind a little bit on the Mobileye route, and one of the biggest changes in 25 model year is the smart driving kind of the stack with the new standard orange chips, LiDAR, RoboSense LiDAR, 8295. And remember that one of the Zeekr, when they first launched 001 a couple of years ago, one of the issues they had with customers was the 828 chip and the screen, it wasn't working well.
Yeah.
So they upgraded to 8155 for free, but you can't do this for the 2024 model year. I think
Right.
that they said that because of the wiring, the harness, right? The
cost.
Yeah,
Because there's many more
and
Zeekr 001s in the wild right now.
yeah, so that's part of the competitive environment forcing you to make these kind of moves, which at the end of the day, as I said, for better or worse, speed kills or speed wins, right? And
just at a certain point in time,
it,
I think it's gotten ridiculous already.
But also, I think it could be one-off. So I don't imagine Zeekr doing this every day, every year. Say, by the middle of 2025, they launch a 2026 or 2027 edition. It could be this one-off, but we'll see. But I think the standard is within 12 months, a refresh comes out. It's hard to imagine that goes down to 6 across the industry.
I could see major over-the-air updates.
Yeah,
every
that's
6 months.
happening. That's been happening. That's the standard for many years now. Yeah, but yeah,
And culturally, this if we're looking at some of the big news, other big news this week, GM is
sure.
looking to
We can
restructure
go
in
there.
China, and these are the reasons for that because the legacy OEMs just can't keep up. The speed at which change happens in China is such that culturally, if your mindset has been every 3 years, I'm going to build a brand new vehicle or refresh entirely a brand new product. Now it's 18 months. It's just hard to revolutionize something that's been ingrained in the culture, in the processes, in the policy, in the sourcing for 100 years. And so I've always pointed to, and you know this, Lei, that we can change things at Legacy Auto, but if they don't change from a management and culture standpoint, it's just going to be impossible for them to make the transition over and be able to keep up with the Teslas and the NIOs and the BYDs.
Yeah, and this lack of speed for GM, for the foreign automakers, for the joint ventures that are operating in China is exactly one of the reasons why they've lagged behind the last few years. And this news on GM, and I think it's as much about GM as it is about SAIC, because if you look at SAIC as a group, they're facing a bit of pressure as well. If you look at their group sales, including all the joint ventures, including Wuling, and they just recently, just this week, had a huge management shuffle of their 2 major joint ventures, GM and Volkswagen. So Shanghai GM hired a Patek guy as their new president, tech guy. And
let me ask you this. Let me stop you right there, Lei, because I'd like you to help me understand something. So there's GM International Operations in Shanghai. There is Shanghai GM. There's Patek, and then there. So I'm. Can you map this out? What the different entities are?
Well, Patek is kind of the local R&D organization for Shanghai GM, for GM China for that matter, because a lot of the locally models are initially developed there. And I think there was another executive that left that was in charge of GM International, which included GM China. So I think the issue is, kind of like Ford over many of number of years, the organizational issue, Asia Pacific over China, and then finally China was a standalone. So to me, I think going forward, it's this autonomy really for any of these foreign automakers that they operate, the autonomy of their joint ventures. And they really have to treat themselves like a China EV Inc. startup in order to compete, rather than relying on. So they need this autonomy to make quicker decisions. And whether GM is willing to give that up, right? These are the issues that probably were being discussed.
And the fact of the matter is the local operations don't want to be held back by headquarters, by the mothership. It's the same with Volkswagen. It's the same with GM. And so they're finally getting this autonomy, but it could be too little too late.
Yeah, I was reading this interview in the Chinese media of this new president, and he basically denied rumors that GM was going to sell Buick to SAIC. There were rumors about that. He denied it, and he also denied that Chevrolet is leaving. He said going forward, the 3 brands, Buick, Cadillac, Chevrolet, will continue to have various models coming out, and it will be a 3-brand strategy. So we'll see about that. But I think in the short term, it's about, I think Mayor Barra also mentioned this in the earnings call, that inventory management, dealer management, And then, the layoffs are probably going to happen if you want to be profitable.
They're already happening, and I was told at the dealer level, at the staff level, the local employees have been getting laid off, and we should also point to the fact that it looks like GM is moving more towards a Ford model where they want to do an asset light, and then if you compare that and contrast that with the Germans who are actually doubling down, investing more, you get a sense of the difference of how they feel about the markets, because the Germans, of course, still have a much more to lose because a larger portion of their profitability comes from the China market than the US three. Or Stellantis is kind of the 1 foot in the US, 1 foot in Europe. So they're a bit of a hybrid, and they've also integrated a lot of Leap motor products already into their portfolio. So that's going to be more of how much is too much and what's the right combination of Leap motor products, Leap motor IP into the current Stellantis product plan. You and I believe, I think Tavares will likely close shop on 1 or 2 brands, which he's warned last month.
Interesting, Stellantis also made some management changes for China. I think Jeep, Alfa Romeo, right? I think you saw that. And then PodTech, I read that they're, right, so China and GM, they still have 10 new NEV models launching over the next year or so. And they're considering all tech routes, including EREVs. Think about that. So you just have to go with the market, right?
Yeah, and hopefully the lessons learned in China and the speed, the increasing speed, the processes that end up coming out of the China team can be adopted in Europe, in the United States, or for GM, at least in the United States, because they don't really have a European presence. So we've kind of beaten this horse. So what's the next thing you want to talk about?
I think anything out in the newsletter? I think we talked about, the milestones, Angbo, the Zeekr, GM in China.
So actually, let's talk about this, because I don't know if you got a chance to see it, Lei, but CNBC had
I saw that.
Posted a 15-minute video. What'd you think?
Well, I'm glad that CNBC is a big platform, right? So I think that
I think it's close to 1 million views in 3 days.
Yeah, there should be more of these. I think really. I mean, our boys down on the ground, they're doing the China Driven's, Elliot's, Mark, right, Wheels Boy, that they're trying to do what CNBC is basically trying to do already, and just to educate the Western audience of the type of vehicles.
So for those that are wondering, CNBC posted a video, 15-minute video. CNBC US was leading the production of this. They pulled in Eunice Yoon. They had contacted me, and I gave them quite a bit of background, because they pivoted a couple times on subject matter and kind of what they wanted to drill down into. And it ended up being a comparison between a Tesla Model Y in the US versus a NIO, a BYD, a Li Auto, and an XPeng. And for sake of full disclosure, I kind of recommended to Eunice these are the vehicles, because there's so many, and I just wanted her to focus on the US traded companies, and BYD, of course. And so I think generally they did a very, very good job, and it's hard to do 176 episodes worth of detail into a 15-minute video. But one thing that a lot of the NIO folks pointed out was that she was using an older generation swapping station. True. Very, very, very true. But I give them kudos, because Eunice got in these cars. She's speaking Chinese in these cars. And so I think overall, I give it a thumbs up, because I obviously don't have any control over how they present it, right? And so it was good. I think it's an eye opener for more mainstream people now, because of course you listeners who have been listening for a while know all about this stuff because Lei and I have driven XPengs and we've been to auto shows and we regularly tell you things that media can't because we're not journalists. And so we hear rumors and we'll mention them in these shows. But yeah, have a look when you get a chance. It's on YouTube. It's on CNBC. So
Yeah. So yeah, we have inside access, right? So
anything that you thought was like, oh man, that's not right or that's wrong.
no, I think it's difficult to get the latest and the greatest if you were doing if you want to educate. I think it's more of educating the general kind of the competitive environment on the ground, rather than if you were positioning to show the latest and the greatest. That's something else, right? So there's always, Zeekr, right? The latest Zeekr 2025 model year with the oh 07 with the 10.5 minute charging speed. Obviously, you're not gonna show that as soon as it comes out, but and
It's a good first effort.
yeah, because yeah, first step. Maybe next time do a Zeekr, do a Xiaomi. Right, there's many. There's at the start of the video, it said there were 139 brands.
And people are wondering about subsidies. So they highlighted BYD, how much they've gotten in subsidies from the Chinese government. So if you're curious about those things, there's also a decent amount of data that's being thrown at you. So
Yeah. And then, at the top of the show, you mentioned about checking out the Polestar. In China, my own experience is go to any dealership, showroom, and more than likely you can just get a test drive on the spot right there. You want to check things out, putting your consumer hat on.
actually, one thing, Lei, sorry, if you want to keep on talking about this, we can keep on talking about, but I wanted to get your thoughts on a Mercedes EQE in Korea, just outside of Seoul, had spontaneously combusted in an underground parking lot. It was revealed that they're using Farasis cells for that particular vehicle, and 140 vehicles in the parking garage were damaged. Dozens of people were injured, and so Korea is now kind of freaking out, rightfully so, because they are concerned about EVs being parked, EVs being charged. And so, what are your thoughts on that? And how much do you think this is Farasis in particular or specifically challenged versus just having more EVs in underground parking lots?
First of all, it's salt on the wound of that relationship or partnership of Mercedes and Farasis, which hasn't been going well. And that's why they're diversifying their kind of supply, battery supply, cell supply, right?
Important to note that Mercedes is an investor in Farasis.
Yeah, that was announced in 2020, I think, or 21.
19?
Yeah, it was early. It was early part of the pandemic. I remember that was the strategic investment. Second, it's. Do you look at it? It's probably one of those isolated incident that happened to be Mercedes. It can be anyone, and EVs catching on fire. It's a topic that we have no. It's difficult to pinpoint a right or wrong answer. It's happening in China. Still happening in China. I think Zeekr boasts that out of all the vehicles they've sold, they've never had a one single fire.
Right.
I don't know if that's correct, but they pride on themselves saying that. Can everyone say that? I don't know. And what exactly was the issue, the circumstances? It's always a tough topic.
That's going to be interesting to see because it wasn't plugged in, and so it was definitely spontaneous. And the other thing that should be noted,
let's just say a rat ate into the cell. It's like my dog ate my homework.
the one thing that's also very important is that Mercedes really, and when I was in Beijing, I'd spoken to a few of Merc folks. I think they really thought Farasis could be the partner to balance out CATL's strength. And Mercedes wanted Farasis to be their European cell provider.
Yeah.
Ferasis wasn't ready for the bright lights. And so the factory that was planned in Europe never happened. And that is also subsequently when Mercedes began dual sourcing from CATL. And so currently, I believe that Mercedes sources from Ferasis, SK, and CATL. So one of the outcomes, and this was voluntary, was that the OEMs in Korea are now communicating who the cell manufacturer for their particular products are.
Yeah, sometimes usually that's not communicated, or they refrain from communicating that. Yeah.
Well, and what's important, Lei, is battery fires aren't exclusive to Chinese cells.
No.
Well, so for the folks that are just tuning in or tuning in late, I happen to have a Lucid Air for the next week, and I'm not a car review guy. I will push it. I would gladly recommend a few of the other guys inside EVs we're friendly with. And so that's not my thing, although I'll likely post 1 or 2 videos with my thoughts. But, for a deep dive, I would go to those guys. But I do have one for a week. It's a Grand Touring. It is pretty nice, man. And the deals they have for the Polestar 2 and the Lucid Air currently are pretty enticing. And so it for a sedan, it's about the size of an S-Class. The roominess is I have 2 sons, 2 growing boys, and they're like, this is so roomy in the back. So.
Yeah, it's the US version of the Stellato S9, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's yeah. So if there are any questions, DM me, post them, and I'll try to answer them. I'm still trying to figure out how to use the interior front console to my liking. Yeah. So I'm watching YouTube videos. So
well, just try it out. I mean, just fiddle with it.
And one thing I do know is that you mash on the gas, it goes. So, but electric vehicles, they all kind of do that, right?
Speaking of roominess, I think the Envo, some of the pictures put out by the Envo L60 was a little provocative, with the deer in the back row.
Right,
I saw that.
Right.
I'm like, and then,
I think it looks great. I think the Envo looks great.
I mean, at that price point, right?
The other thing that so this weekend happens to be the Woodward Dream Cruise, Lei.
Ah, right.
So I will be driving up and down Woodward in this Lucid to see if I get a bunch of dirty looks or a bunch of honks, because the Lucid, you do not see them in Michigan very many. Do you see them in Mass?
I've seen some here. I've seen some Lucids here in a small town. I've seen some Taycans. I've seen some Cybertrucks.
Yeah, I started to see handfuls of Cybertrucks now too.
Supposedly there was a Cybertruck in China with the green license plate. I don't know if you saw that or not. Somebody, I don't know how they bought one.
It's street legal?
I guess so, if they had the green license plate, or somebody PS'd it. I don't know.
So the last thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is Hi-Fi officially? Can we stick a fork in Hi-Fi officially?
Yeah, done.
Gonzo. And it should be noted that Hi-Fi was co-founded by an ex-General Motors Shanghai executive.
Yeah, former Shanghai GM president. So
if you're wondering, a lot of ex-German Legacy Inc. on the China side anyways are and US Legacy Inc. are now executives at a lot of these startups. So no different than a Frank Wu, head of design for GYue, moving over from GM to BAIC to GYue. So
yeah,
but
I mean the 07, right? That's another highly expected model out of GYue. So,
and I know we haven't gotten that close to NIO Day, but not a lot going on with the ET9 yet. I'm expecting
Well, it's
probably in the next
year,
5 or 6 weeks. Yeah. So that's all I have, man. Let's open it up for questions. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. I will read a couple of the comments here. Unfortunately, Polestar treats the product like an electrified 240DL wagon. Need a lot more spice to get America interested. Just my 2 cents. That's from Jeffrey, NIO San Francisco.
Yeah.
And then Anvo, let's get it, NIO. The M3M is here. I'm not sure what's the M3M, Lei?
I don't know.
So Peter Liu, it's a dead road for foreign tech firms in China if their headquarters don't give their China JVs autonomies. It's tried and proved. Auto firms have some lucks until they run into the transition to EVs recently. Yeah, completely agree. China speed, F1 car legacy speed, an elephant on a unicycle. Man, these comparisons are great. And Peter also said the CNBC video is excellent. So yeah, cool. I'm people are gonna nitpick some of the stuff, especially the ones that know a little bit. So, but again, generally speaking, CNBC has a pretty broad audience, and I think it does a pretty good job of representing what's out there currently, even if some of the technology is a little bit older that they had used for those vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, you can never cover everything and be perfect at pleasing to all audience, right? So,
Yeah, I don't have anything. So you want to close it out here?
Yeah, sure.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will talk with you all next week.
Yep. Enjoy Woodward.
Hey, thanks again for joining, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Next week.
Yep. Same here. Likewise. Have a good Woodward. Bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.